Hi, I'm in the dark, in the green room. Greetings. This is chapter 7 of Black Sabbath on Music, episode 7. Um, I realized that the last video that I posted, I made a lot of controversial commentaries on Ozzy Osbourne. So, um, I haven't had the video up long enough, really, or have much of an audience to have any kind of real backlash yet. May not have one at all. Um, but yeah, I just, in case anyone had any thoughts about that, I just wanted to touch on it real quick that I pretty much stand by everything I said. So that's it. Um, when I left the band, I was talking about Ozfest and how they were doing that every year. In 2002, it should be noted, um, Jeff Nichols was still playing keyboards with the band, and Ozzy was sick. And at one show, Rob Halford filled in and did the whole set. It was all Ozzy material, obviously. And Rob didn't sound his best. I don't know. Some of his renditions, like Fairies Wear Boots, were pretty cool. And some weren't, but, he looked cool and everybody seemed to be having a good time. Uh, I wish he joined Black Sabbath or one album in the 90s after Dio left, kind of the way Ian Gillan did. That would have been so cool. But anyway, what's done is done. The footage for the whole show where he replaced Dio at Costa Mesa 2 nights, 1992, toward the end of the year, um, are all over YouTube, so you can see the whole concert. The picture quality is fairly okay. On the last video, I put a screenshot. It was kind of a high def picture. I don't know who took it or how they got a hold of it, of him and Tony together on stage at that show. Um, Sabbath wasn't really on my mind much in those days. I mean, I did listen to Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules and Born Again with regularity. I still had them on CD. I had sold my other CDs. I had a while back sold all my vinyl. Um, but I still listen to those 3 albums fairly regularly. And then online, I would listen to. I would download the albums. I started doing that. Oh, I'm not supposed to admit that I do that, but um, anyway, I started acquiring the albums online probably around 2003. Well, 2004. Yeah, 2004. As soon as I got internet regularly, permanently in my own home, which was 2004, believe it or not, it took that long. I had been on the internet, but I was still pretty ignorant about computers, and um, I had not had a chance to. I hadn't had a computer, excuse me, decent enough to even run anything worth running. So I finally did that. Um, And maybe around 2005, I guess, is when I first started getting some tracks here and there. And I started watching some shows, listening to some shows. Eventually, I built a library. Eventually, I started burning a series of DVDs. I ended up doing like 15 of them, where I pretty much spread out over 15 DVDs, as many Black Sabbath songs as possible, either live versions or studio versions. I got to where some songs that were only like the only graphic to download was the album cover, and so that's what I went with. But I tried to do ones that a few fan created ones that were kind of interesting that I liked, and of course, their few music videos that they officially did, which are of varying quality. I mean, aesthetic quality, picture quality, fine. I wasn't a big fan of any of the videos from the Tony Martin era, except The Shining. I think it's an awesome video, and I've watched it to death. And No Stranger to Love with Glenn Hughes, and of course that's like the zenith of their melodic metal, uh, power ballad, power metal, pop metal kind of flirtation there. It's so 1987. I mean, one of them is 1986, one is 1987 toward the very end of the year. But they really encapsulate that magical time, which I've talked about on a variety of videos, a little bit on here and also in my Flickr Street videos. And I have a Flickr Street arc called 1987, which encompasses 1986 to 1988 and Flickr Street's reality. In my reality, it was an interesting time. I was unhappy in a lot of ways, but I was happy in a lot of other ways. It was weird, creatively fertile time, definitely, and exciting to be getting into all kinds of new music and just constantly, obsessively listening to music all through that year. I'd say the bands that I listened to the most that year, probably Sabbath was one. I would say Motorhead and King Crimson, both of them I got into in vain in that year. So it's a lot of that. Not sure what else. Probably ones I'm forgetting. But anyway, so Sabbath kind of went off my radar in the 2000s, I guess is my point. Until around 2006, I believe, I started reading some rumors of a best of collection coming out, and that the Mob Rules / Dehumanizer lineup would be interested in recording some new tracks to include on it. And at first they were going to get Bill Ward. Geezer Butler, Jeff Nichols, Tony Iommi, Ronnie James Dio. By this time, Jeff Nichols was no longer a member of Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was essentially the original lineup, plus I believe their keyboardist at that time was Adam Wakeman, Rick Wakeman's son, though I could be wrong. I know he played in those reunion years somewhat. Talk about a new studio album kept surfacing, but Ozzy kept pushing it back, and I think the band just wanted to play. They just wanted to play some music and record some new music. And in my personal theory, based on everything I've read and interviews I've seen and the material itself, is that they enjoyed playing music the most with Ronnie Dio, and why I keep coming back to him over and over again. There was a special chemistry there. And so they did. They recorded 3 new Black Sabbath songs, and they're among the last tracks ever recorded, new tracks, studio tracks recorded under the name Black Sabbath. There's one album subsequent to that, which we'll deal with later, and there was an album with Dio, but it was not under the moniker Black Sabbath. We're getting to that. These were songs called The Devil Cried, Ear in the Wall, and wow, of course I'm going to forget the other one. I liked all of them. I think they were something in the Wind, Shadow of the Wind, I think maybe is it. I really liked these songs, and the more I listened to them, the more they grew on me. So now we're talking more towards 2007, and there's talk that they're gonna, do a tour together as Black Sabbath. And of course, Bill Ward did not record the studio tracks. He opted out. His excuse this time was it's not with Ozzy. But he would often say something like, well, now I've done the reunion with Ozzy, so now that's all the past. So now I can go ahead and play with anybody in Black Sabbath. Then it would come time, for that to happen, and he would go, I don't know, doesn't feel right without Ozzy. Ozzy felt fine without him, though, and being in Black Sabbath. We found out a few years later. So I think his loyalty, his lifelong loyalty, is admirable, but sorely misplaced. In any case, the Sabbath greatest hits came out, whatever it was called, best of. It had some great tracks. It was the Dio years. That's essentially what it was. So it was tracks from the three Dio studio albums, and they chose the Children of the Sea rendition from Live Evil, which is a high point of Live Evil, no doubt, but not in the caliber of the original recording, but whatever. Um, Pretty well rounded, and then those three new tracks. Um, and then Vinny Appice is the drummer on these tracks, of course. They kind of defaulted to him once again. He's kind of their go-to default drummer, or at least whenever Dio's involved. Can't get Bill Ward, get Vinny Appice. Can't get Cozy Powell, get Vinny Appice. I like Vinny Appice. Vinny gets a lot of stick, so to speak, about his drumming, and no pun intended. And I don't think rightfully so. I mean, I see where old school fans don't prefer his style. I mean, I have some good friends who fall under that uh, heading. He doesn't have the nuances of Bill Ward, but I mean, even Bill Ward didn't have a whole lot of nuance on the later material he did with Sabbath, like Heaven, Hell, and Born Again. But he still was incredible. Um, I think Vinny's just a monster on Mob Rules, and he's good on Live Evil. I like his drumming a lot. I think that lineup, those four guys, Dio, Iommi, Ward, Dio, Iommi, Butler, um, Appice, with or without Nichols, is great. You know, and they decided they were going to go on the road as Black Sabbath, but then it didn't materialize. The Black Sabbath part, the going on the road part, and the recording a new album part, yes. Um, by the time the album was recorded, they were called Heaven and Hell. So they were like a new band, even though they were, as Dio said in interviews, everybody knows what it is. It's Sabbath with Ronnie. And yes, of course. Um, the album was called The Devil You Know. It came out, I believe, in 2008, if I'm correct. And um, I uh, I was really disappointed with the album. In a lot of ways, it reminded me of some of the later Dio solo material, solo slash Dio the band, however you want to look at it, uh, which I think was written and played played more. I think his later material, because he had several incarnations of his band, but he had some memorable ones. The memorable one for me was the Tracy G lineup with Tracy G on guitar. That lineup the music was strong. I think he needed somebody strong and also somebody very modern sounding, and that's kind of what happened with that. So like Angry Machines and albums like that have some incredible tracks, and there's great tracks kind of scattered throughout those later albums. My favorite is As Long as It's Not About Love, um, but there's a few that I like a lot too. But This Is Your Life, of course, these two tracks are both like largely melodic, um, which is what I wanted to hear him do more of as he got older anyway. Well, that doesn't happen on The Devil You Know. The Devil You Know is kind of, yeah, you can tell Dio was very prominent in the arrangement of the songs, um, more than he had probably been in Black Sabbath previously. Of course, now he's in Heaven and Hell. So, what is Heaven and Hell? It's a strange aggregate. But it was my favorite musical aggregate on earth from 2007 to 2010. Its brief existence. Um, they toured. I was going to try to get tickets to the Radio City Music Hall show in New York. My then girlfriend lived in Greenwich Village, and I was like, let's go, And then I realized the day tickets went on sale. I realized that was hopeless. There were way too many people who had already bought the tickets in advance, and it was going to be pretty pricey, which wasn't really an obstacle then, so much as just being able to get a hold of the tickets. And then as the year waned, I really my funds kind of prevented me from returning to New York City, and I don't think I've been since 2007. I'm pretty sure I have not. Um, So, well, yeah, okay. I had a stopover in New York City in 2017, but that was it. Uh, but I knew I couldn't see them live unless they came near here, and I knew they weren't going to come near here except Atlanta, and I didn't know if they were even going to come to Atlanta, and I don't think they did come to Atlanta. They kind of neglected the American South. They played a lot of the U.S. and they played a lot of Europe, and some other odd places. Not Sun City though, thank God. I don't even know if Sun City still exists, but anyway, that's a flashback to a previous chapter of this saga. Um, they put out a DVD of the live at City Music Hall. So, Radio City Music Hall from the outside is not that big. I mean, it's really strange. In Charlotte, everything's like spread out. Like buildings are very wide. There's lots of cavernous hallways everywhere. It's like last year at Marienbad or something. And it's not like that in New York. Everything's kind of crunched and goes up. And so things I heard about my whole life that I dreamed of seeing when I went to New York, that I thought were going to be sprawling and just mind blowing, were like the size of my backyard, and I was like, whoa. And the entrance to Radio City Music Hall, I mean, it goes down, and of course the dome itself takes most of the block, but the entranceway and everything is smaller than anything you'd see in Charlotte like that. I mean, Charlotte, we have a place called Ericsson Stadium that has two gigantic Black Panthers. I mean, it's like Wakanda. It really is like Wakanda. And it's like, if it was Charlotte Panthers, whatever sport team, I don't know anything about sports. I'll be honest. That's something I don't really care about. So probably had like 10 unsubscribers just now for saying that. I could care less about sports. I'm here to talk about Black Sabbath. So anyway, the Radio City Music Hall DVD came out, and it was good. Dio's voice had gotten a lot deeper and thicker. He wasn't hitting the mid range as much as he always had been just brilliant at. Rarely hit any high range, and uh, I think the band tuned down a little bit to suit that. And that kind of combination really made stuff sound really heavy. I mean, the Devil You Know album, it is a heavy album, and there are some songs on there that I think are in the vein of the three great songs they did as Black Sabbath, the last three they ever did as Black Sabbath that I mentioned a few minutes ago. There's a song called Fear that's pretty good. And there's one called Follow the Tears that is my favorite. I think it's absolutely incredible. And a lot of Dio's lyrics sprinkled throughout that album were really nice. And I liked his lyrics on the three Sabbath songs, the later Sabbath songs as well, quite a bit. Always liked his lyrics with Sabbath. Always liked his lyrics with Rainbow, and his solo album. I mean, solo career. I think there were times he kind of became cliched at times and repeated himself too much. But when he was sincere and he was on, he was really very soulful, and it meant a lot to me. I mean, Dio was a force in my life long before he became popular like he is now. I mean, and you think of how long it took him to become this popular. I mean, it really, well, it's a cliche in and of itself, but it took until after he died. And in 2009, we found out he had stomach cancer, we meaning the world, and he said he was going to lick it and do a bunch of Heaven and Hell shows late 2010 and mid to late 2010, and unfortunately, it licked him first, and I forgot what month he died in, to be honest. That period of my life is kind of a strange blur, but in a lot of ways. But I got married in 2010, so those incidents are pretty somewhat vivid to me. But the Sabbath stuff, I was still recording like as many tracks and as many concerts as I could, and adding them to my kind of archives. To where by that time I had quite a lot, and I added The Devil You Know. I added the songs from the current tours, the 2008, 2009 world tours. But 2009 was to be it, and 2010, Heaven and Hell played their last show. When I go over the history of the group, and it much more of a history and facts and things like that, I'll get the dates on these, but um, just off my memory, it was well into 2010 when Dio passed, and he died at age 67. He was born in on July 10th, which is my birthday, 1942. For a number of years during his during later years of Rainbow, through the years of Black Sabbath and the early years of Dio, I guess for maybe about 10, 12 years, he lied professionally and shaved 5 years off his age, and so came out as being born in 1947, and thus only being slightly older than the guys in Black Sabbath, rather than a few years. But eventually his real age came to light, and when he died, it was no secret or whatever. I don't blame him, because in a lot of ways he got a late start in heavy rock and heavy metal. Um, but in music, he started at age 13. He went to New York City. He was in New York State. He went to New York City, and he started doing like doo wop kind of singing, and that was 1955. Rock and roll was starting. He was there when rock and roll, was congealing into what it became, and he kind of followed the currents of that all through the late 50s, all the way into the early 70s, starting in the mid 60s with a band that had some childhood friends and members of his family, which eventually became known as Elf. And Elf finally put out an album, 1972, called Elf, and Elf was the band he had before he joined Rainbow. I'm giving you this history lesson about Dio just because it's cool. But in any case, Dio passed away, and that took care of any hope of there being that Black Sabbath as Black Sabbath. The last show Heaven and Hell played, which I was getting to earlier, Glenn Hughes did the vocals on quite a lot of the Ronnie songs, and that was really nice to hear him singing with Black Sabbath and sounding great, and with Geezer and Vinny Appice in the band. And then a guy named Jordan Land did a few songs, and Jordan Land has got a really good voice. He does a lot of covers. He does a lot of metal covers, and he's good at imitating Dio and Halford and some of these guys, and he's got a good range. Again, he's not going to be remembered probably because he's weak in the writing department, and that's kind of your immortality in rock music. More than even as much as you're playing, I think, is your writing, and people may dispute that, but I think if playing is tantamount in jazz, and composing is important in jazz too. I mean, there are great jazz composers who have classics that we'll always hear, like Duke Ellington and Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis, who doesn't get enough credit for that. But frankly, though, the playing is really what's important in rock and pop. Rock being kind of a fragment of pop or whatever, it's the songs and the albums that people remember, and the people that created them, out of nothingness, like the Beatles did, and like Black Sabbath did. I mean, these guys came completely out of left field. I think I talked about this a little bit on one of the prior videos. It's kind of mind-boggling, really, to me anyway. I mean, when I look at it and I kind of dwell in it and think about it. In any case, I continued being a crazed Sabbath aficionado, collector, etc. And within about a year and a half, I heard that they were gonna actually finally record a studio album with Ozzy Osbourne, and lo and behold, in the year 2013 came out the album 13, apostrophe 13 for 2013. And I guess 13 having the stigma of being an unlucky number, and them having the kind of spooky imagery. Yeah. Um, I've gone a little long, so I'm going to wrap this up. But next time, we're going to pick up with the year 2013 and the album 2013 and what I thought about it, and move up to the end of Sabbath in 2017. And then I'll be wrapping up this phase of these videos, and we're going to go into another phase about Black Sabbath. So, and then after I flogged that horse to death, then I'm going to choose another band to do this with. Actually, I've already chosen the band, um, but a band is anyway. I could go on tangents forever, but thanks a lot for listening, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye bye.